Have you ever gone into a fitting room and get this odd feeling that there's a hidden camera somewhere watching you change? Truth be told, this is a common fear for most people, but for the students at Bloomingdale High School, that fear became real. In 1991, Mark Ackett started working for the Hillsborough School District. In 2006, he was hired as an assistant principal at Bloomingdale High, but left in 2009 when he was promoted to an administration job at the district supervisor of attendance. After some time, he returns in 2017 and became a girls track coach and a fashion design teacher at the same school. According to the students, Mark said that he became a fashion design teacher because he thought fashion was calling him. He was liked by the students and they felt safe around him. He was said to be well-spoken and seemed to care a lot about his students. He's a married man with 2 teenage boys. No one had anything negative to say about him. But that would soon change on the following school year on September 11, 2018. A 17-year-old girl was changing in a dressing area inside a fashion design classroom. The student noticed 2 boxes on a shelf with one of them having a light coming from it. That's when she found the cell phone, and when she flipped it over to see the screen, she noticed that it was recording. She even found the second phone as well. She immediately told the school's principal, who then notified the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Authorities quickly questioned Mark and he didn't even try to deny it. He admitted to everything. He said that he had been secretly recording his students from his fashion design class since January 2017, the year he returned. Mark gets arrested and was able to bail out 2 days later. After doing so, he quits his job. The police then arrested him again in October 2018. He was charged of video voyeurism on school property as a school employee, production of harmful material of a minor, and possession of child pornography. This time he couldn't bail out as his bail was $2 million. Investigators went through his phone, his computer, including going through his Google accounts and other digital devices such as 3 digital cameras, 2 storage cards, and multiple thumb drives that were found in his school's desk. They ended up finding hundreds more videos and pictures of his young underage students undressing. The students range in ages 14 to 18 and were in various stages of undress at the school. The videos even showed Mark setting up the cameras, adjusting them, and coming back inside the dressing room to stop the recording. That same week of his first arrest back in September, 2 former students of his had come out to say that they're afraid that they might be victims as well. Both Emily and Chase were students of his during the 2017 school year. Emily had said that she was never skeptical of him. She even goes on to say that he was a genuine guy and one of her favorite teachers as well, so she was shocked to hear a teacher that she really liked to get arrested for something like this. The other student, Chase, said she never got a creepy vibe from him and now feels uncomfortable because she said she had changed in that room many times, sometimes fully undressed as well. They both believe that they were manipulated by him. Emily recalls that Mark had made a dress for her and asked if she could try it on. She kindly declined, but Mark tells her, "But I worked so hard on it for you." This made her feel bad, so she ended up putting it on. She also brings up one segment of the senior survival class involved making men's boxer shorts. Each student had to try on shorts of different sizes so they knew which size to make. Mark would make dresses, shorts, and tops for her and another girl throughout the school year. Mark had gotten Chase to try on a romper that he made for her and told her to change. The two mentioned that Mark would go out of his way to make them feel comfortable. That, and he would also be careful and seem to watch his words. For instance, he had the students measure each other because Mark told the students, "I'm not trying to be the creepy teacher who touches girls." When Chase first heard the news, she immediately thought, was that why he seemed to care about me? Because he was videotaping me? Was that why he picked me for his romper project? What made this more disturbing for Emily is that Mark has even told her that he sees her as his daughter, and she questioned if he could really tell her all of that and still record her undressing. What worries the girls even more is the possibility of Mark sharing these videos to others, or worse, if those videos had made it to the internet. At the end of the school year, Mark had typed a farewell letter to his students. They were all given one and all were the same except for Emily's letter. He left in a handwritten note where he calls her one of the most toughest, most disciplined young people I've ever known. She kept that letter as it was special to her. She tucked it into her yearbook as a keepsake. But now, with Mark arrested and charged for recording his students, that note now makes her sick anytime she reads it. Emily has even stated at the beginning of the school year she did check the room for cameras as a precaution, but she never found anything. Either Mark didn't place a phone that day, or Emily didn't look hard enough. Both former students said that even if Mark never recorded them, they still feel betrayed by their former teacher who they really thought cared about them as students, not as objects to fulfill his sick fantasies. On April 1st, 2021, Mark pleaded guilty to 323 counts of video voyeurism. It was found out that he had 125 victims in total. 124 of them were students, and the other was an adult employee. He also pleaded guilty to 27 counts from an unrelated video voyeurism case not connected to his teaching positions. This was something he did at his home. You see, he hosted Bible studies at his home and had set up cameras there as well. The devices contained videos of nothing but underage girls as well. 13 instances where the victims were under the age of 16. Those 13 counts are second-degree felonies. The other 14 are third-degree felonies. Mark is now facing a maximum of 15 years of prison for each second-degree felony and up to 5 years for each third-degree felony. Mark decided to take an open plea, which means he's leaving his fate to the judge. The judge would determine if some or all the sentences would run concurrently or consecutively. Mark couldn't handle hearing his charges. It was said when the prosecution read a summary of his crimes, he lowered his gaze and closed his eyes. A month later, on May 10th, Mark is sentenced to 15 years in prison.
Good evening, Jen. Well, Mark Ackett was a teacher at Bloomingdale High School. He taught fashion design and he was a coach for the girls' track team. But in 2018, a 17-year-old student found a recording device in a dressing room that led Hillsborough County deputies to find hundreds of recordings of victims where Ackett set up cameras to capture them undressing in school and in a couple of instances at his home. The judge just pronounced sentence in the case. Ackett was facing more than 300 years in prison for all of the crimes and all of the offenses that he had been charged with. The judge, however, found that since the state was asking for only 15 years in prison, she agreed with them. The defense had asked for 0 time in prison. However, the judge ruled because there were so many victims in this case that he must serve some time behind bars. So the judge ruled 15 years in prison with credit for time served, and that he will be in probation for the rest of his life and must register as a sexual offender. There are a number of special conditions with that probation, but essentially this means that Ackett will serve far less time than some are hoping for, but he will serve at least 12 to 15 years in prison. Jen?
During the sentencing, his friends, fellow church members, neighbors, and his wife of almost 30 years begged the judge to show Mark some mercy. They hoped that the judge would be lenient in their sentencing decision. Mark would also lower his head, swallowing hard, and just staring at his apology letter. His attorney asked for a maximum of 3 years and time on probation, promising that Mark would continue seeking treatment, but the judge said no. Mark was given the chance to read his apology letter to his victims.
For a long time you've wanted to address your victims but were unable to do so, so this is your opportunity if there's anything that you would like to say to them.
I want to say to my victims that I have read every impact statement that you've written, because I wanted to truly hear your feelings and try to feel what you're going through. Mr. Suarez warned me that it would be painful, and he was right. But I knew that I could never honestly ask for your forgiveness if I had not heard what you have to say. Those statements caused me to look back at my behavior at the time and who I had become, and I'm deeply, deeply ashamed. I found truth in those statements, and they caused me to come face to face with how broken I was. I would like to say first to the victims, I am truly sorry for what I did and for the pain that it caused you and still causes you. What I did was a violation of your privacy and a violation of your trust. I know that what I did was inexcusable and very possibly for many of you unforgivable. I ask for your forgiveness, even knowing that I do not deserve it. You deserve someone that you could trust, and I led you to believe that I was that someone. In my own broken thinking, I believed that I was. I wish I could go back and change what I did or do something to make amends, but I know that I cannot. I feel especially ashamed of what I did because you treated me with such care and respect. Some of you confided in me your fears and problems, and many of you considered my classroom a safe place to escape the problems that you faced. I am truly sorry that in the end, my actions caused you so much pain. I will never forgive myself for turning what should have been a fond memory for you into something that you would rather forget. Not a day goes by that I do not think of the pain that I have caused you and how I have thrown away the blessing of being able to look you in the eye. I would also like to say to the parents that I'm sorry and ashamed that I hurt your daughters. You sent them to me and trusted that I would treat them like my own. I looked many of you in the eye and told you what wonderful young ladies they were and that I would protect them from pain and problems. I told you that I would help them through the difficulties of growing up and give them a chance to grow and learn. I failed to do that. And in fact, I became part of the problem and the pain. I know that I may not deserve your forgiveness, but I beg you to forgive me. I would also like to say that I'm sorry to the teachers and administrators that I worked beside. Each of you cared deeply about your students, and you hurt for them and are angry at me for betraying them and you as well. I know that I've damaged the trust between teacher, student, and parent, and then I left you to put the pieces back together. You deserved loyalty and honesty from me, but I let you down. I came to you at a very low point in my life, and you did everything you could to help me through it. I owed you gratitude, and I gave you the opposite. My actions were my own. And yet you, despite being totally innocent, had to endure scrutiny. I hope that someday you can forgive me for hurting those students that you hold dear and for making your job harder than it already is. The hardest question I've asked myself over the past 2 years is if I really cared as much about my students as I did, how could I do anything to hurt them? Not sure that I fully know the honest answer yet. All I know is that 30 years ago, I went into teaching because I wanted to help kids. I've never been the best teacher, but I have always cared about my students. And in those years, I cared about helping students with only their best interest at heart. In the last year of teaching, I made a horrible decision to risk everything, including my students' emotional health, in an effort to fill a hole in myself. Somehow I was able to separate what I was doing in secret from who I wanted to be to my students. I told my students and myself that I cared about them and wanted the best for them. And I truly believed that I would have stood between them and a gunman. I know that my actions and decisions do not support that belief. I'm working hard in counseling to understand what led me to make the bad decisions that I did. And I am committed to working even harder to make sure that I live a morally sound life in accordance with my Christian faith. Your Honor, I would also like to apologize to law enforcement as well as this court. This case should have never happened. And I recognize the awful position that I put those investigating me in. I also respect the difficult job that you have, Your Honor, in deciding my punishment. I know that the task of making sure that justice is done, society is protected, and law is followed is a daunting one, and I'm sorry for adding to that load. Your Honor, I want you to know that I'm sorry for many things, but I am not sorry that I was caught. I wish that I had never started or that I could have stopped on my own, but I simply was not strong enough. I would lie awake some nights drowning in guilt, wondering how I was going to stop. The answer that I couldn't seem to find at the time is that I should have asked for help. I remember a burden lifting off of me as I told what I had done, because I realized that even though my life was going to drastically change and some really bad things were going to happen to me, it was over. And I was finally free of the guilt of lying and hiding that I had been living through. I know that finding out that I had betrayed them hurt the victims, and I wish there would have been some way of sparing them. I hope that knowing that I had not shared anything with anyone else would have helped. But I wish I could have gone to each one of you and told you just how sorry I was, I am, and I always will be, and to beg you to forgive me 2 years ago. Your Honor, in my life I have gained most of my self-worth by helping others. Up until my arrest, I was able to help young people and their parents navigate the difficulties of growing up. I felt that it was sort of my calling. I know that I've thrown that gift away, but I hope I can find another way to help others someday. I know that I can never make up for what I had done, but I hope that it's possible that I will have a chance to use my mistakes to talk and work with others who struggle with similar problems. Maybe I could prevent someone else from doing the things that I've done. Thank you, Your Honor, for letting me share what's been on my heart for a very long time.
Eva Appleby was the first to speak out. She's the one employee that Mark had recorded. She'd worked with him for 12 years when he was an assistant principal. Eva shared how shocked she was and the disbelief she felt when she heard that she was the only adult employee at the school who he recorded. She described it as getting punched in the stomach. What Mark did was not an isolated lapse of judgment, but calculated and deliberate criminal acts. Mark groomed and chose his victims, gaining their trust and then taking advantage. The parents whose daughter was 15 at the time said that their daughter can't trust the school system, teachers, or even the coaches. They said their daughter is now having a hard time trusting anyone. Some of the victims in the courtroom said anything less than life in prison would be a free pass. They even shared their anger when they found out that Mark was bailed out by his mother. They said they were scared that they would bump into him after learning that he was allowed to stay home with his family while awaiting trial. Some of his victims would mention that they struggle with depression and anxiety. One of his victims that was on the track team had completely quit. Another victim, who was a 12-year-old girl at the time and attended Bible studies at Mark's home, had stopped going to church completely. She tells Mark, "I hope you get the help you need because you need help, and I hope that one day I can see you in heaven. But I think you need nothing less than the maximum sentence for everything you've done to us." To make matters worse is that these victims had to watch the videos or pictures of themselves getting undressed to be able to identify themselves. One victim said she had to spend her dad's birthday in a room with 2 sheriff's deputies identifying pictures of her naked. Another victim said she spent the first day of her senior year of college to attend Mark's sentencing. She said, "I went back to my dorm feeling disgusted and violated, and as if someone was watching me. I remember I felt like I had to take a shower, but when I entered the shower stall, I was fully clothed, and that's how I shower now, sitting on the ground in my clothes until I can build up enough courage to undress." Fox was able to speak with one of the victims, and you can hear from her tone how damaging it was to her.
Really hard for me and upsetting.
I mean, were you completely nude?
Most of them I had my bra and underwear on, but there was one where I had my bra off and you saw it.
She says the violation of privacy never goes away.
Recently when I went to the mall with my friends, I was kind of scared to go in the changing room.
What do you do now in the dressing room?
Kind of look for cameras and make sure there's nothing there.
Now Ackett is headed to prison soon. His former student left to deal with a harsh life lesson.
How could you do this? Because you seem like such a great teacher. We trusted you and now you broke that trust.
Gloria Gomez, Fox.
Ruben Drake, Mark's cognitive behavioral therapist, told the court that in his 53 counseling sessions with Mark since his arrest, his clinical opinion is that he isn't a threat to the community, he's not a pedophile, and that Mark is dedicated and capable of being able to control himself from his compulsions. He goes on to say that Mark isn't a threat because his fantasies never went as far as touching them, but the thrill of secretly watching them, and that Mark's shame and remorse is overwhelming. He adds that Mark did have a childhood trauma that led to this sort of fantasy of him getting satisfied with secretly recording people. He says that Mark knew he had a problem and needed help, but didn't know how to go about it without risking his job, his freedom, and his family's reputation. No one is believing this. Eva had said that if it wasn't for the 17-year-old girl who caught Mark's phone recording her, he would have never been caught and this act would have continued. He is an excellent actor, having fooled us and his very own family for years, acting like he cared, like he respected us, but instead we found out that it was a big act. Mark is currently serving his sentence at the Central Florida Reception Center, and his release date is set at February 25, 2036. As for the students at Bloomingdale High, they refer to that dressing room as the Room of Horrors.